It's 19 after the hour, 7:19, 630 KHOW. Great guest, General Paul Valleys, retired chairman of Stand Up America. Really remarkable career, and we're talking about the U.S. now foreign policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan and, of course, in Iraq. And it's where empires go to die. And Genghis Khan couldn't hold Afghanistan. I don't know why we think we can. How does it end, sir? My remark is, okay, pack everything up that you can and just simply come home.
Well, again, I think there's a strategy of what we're developing at Stand Up America that we're going to present. Is called the Lily Pad strategy, where basically it's joint strike force capability from the lily pads are basically bases we operate from around the world that we control in friendly areas. And then we can launch against the terrorist bases, the jihadi bases, and the root of the problems like Iran. But we come back home. And I think in the case of both Iraq and Afghanistan, you have appeasements going on, and so we'll do like we did in Vietnam. We'll come to some negotiated settlement, and we'll come back home and probably leave some forces over there, as we usually do, that we've done in Korea and other places, but basically no victory.
But with Korea, there's a DMZ, and the North is on this side, South is on this side, and then the South Koreans get a chance to perform what people call the miracle. That certainly wasn't true in Southeast Asia, and I can't imagine it being true in Afghanistan or Iraq.
Well, no, completely different areas, but as you know, North Korea, South Korea is one of the most dangerous places in the world.
Absolutely.
And we didn't let MacArthur finish the war over there.
Yep.
So again, if you don't achieve victory and come back home, we basically won and defeated two of the world powers, the Nazis and the Japanese, in about 3 years and 8 months, and we came home. Though we left bases around. But again, you can't nation build and fight a war. You've got to win the war first, and then let the State Department and these other entities go ahead and help the nations rebuild themselves that have been the enemies of the world. So it's a whole different philosophy, a whole different strategy.
Political correctness plays out in this.
Absolutely.
I watch George Bush and Barack Obama celebrate Ramadan in the White House.
Yes.
And I ask, would either Harry Truman or FDR celebrated the Emperor's birthday, which is a real big deal in Japan? I don't think.
Well, we did continue to coddle, and we're the only one that has an outreach program. The Muslims sure don't.
No.
The only outreach the Islamists have is creating new mosques in the United States and around the world where they recruit and spread their evil.
Yeah.
And they can disguise it all they want to, but I call the mosque, like the one in New York, the Trojan horse of the radical Islamic world. And you have the likes of Saudi Arabia, which continues to be the top funders of global jihad.
I've tried to make the point that horrible day, December the 7th, the most represented nation on earth on those airplanes were Saudis.
We've got to remember today that our mission, the mission of our armed forces and our leaders, is to protect America first, because if we're strong and protected, then we can do a lot of great things. But as we diminish in power, and we fall apart financially here, which there's a good chance of in 2011.
I agree.
Then look at the massive rebuilding we got to do to bring America back to what it was.
The unprotected southern border, it's a doorway. Come on in. I was cracking up. Jeb Bush was just making some remarks using the number 12 million illegals. There hasn't been 12 million illegals in this country in 15 years. How can you take someone like Janet Napolitano, who does all this TSA maturations, and then turn around and Eric Holder sues Arizona for trying to stop illegals from coming in the country? And that's going to lead us into Terry Lakin. But how do you dope all of that out?
Well, I just got back from Scottsdale. I was down there for two events last week, and, of course, the high murder rate, kidnap rate. But not only do you have the drug cartels, but you also have now the influence of Hezbollah, radicals that are being supported from Iran through Chavez in Venezuela, up through Central America. We've got so much stuff coming in across the borders, and groups working together. We see the Zetas, which are the former Mexican military, joining the drug cartels. And so the article that I just wrote basically was to put a 20-mile, 20-kilometer no-go zone south of the border, and I would use our forces to basically conduct offensive operations anywhere within that 20-kilometer zone, because we can't stay on defense. No. And that's what we're doing, trying to hide behind this fence. And it's just not working. They're infiltrating 75, 80 miles into Arizona and other states now, and we're basically being politically correct. And here you have the feds fighting Jan Brewer in Arizona. I mean, it's just national suicide that's going on right now.
How can an Eric Holder puts terrorist on trial in civil?
He should be locked up. He should be put handcuffs on him, and also Obama, and taken away. I think they're conducting treason myself. And,
we'll come back to that, because I look at Eric Holder, who wants to try terrorists born in other countries in civilian courts.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's just upside down.
And Terry Lakin, of course, which we're going to talk about next. Sure. But then they go after Arizona. I mean, it's just insanity.
Oh, it's insanity, absolutely. And again, you can't hide behind a fence and use the ways of police enforcement. The police down there are just overwrought.
It's a war.
Overrun.
It's a war.
You've got to actually go to the source and the root cause of it. And that's the gangs and the cartels and other elements that are coming up through the southern border. It is a war, and we've got to look at it that way.
Bring you right back, sir. General Paul Vallely, retired, chairman of Stand Up America, 630 KHOW. Traffic time. Here's Susan. Denver's talk station. Peter Boyles on a Tuesday. So worthwhile listening to General Paul Vallely, the chairman of Stand Up America. We are talking about U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan and Iran, Iraq, the Middle East. And now comes the case of Colonel Lakin. And for all of us who have been looking at this in terms of my own, in doing this radio show and my own questions, goes back, I think now almost 3 years, when there were some investigative reporters began questioning the lot of what historians call bona fides, or documents, footprints, people call them, of the life of our president, and up to including the concealed documents and records, Punahou School, Occidental College, Columbia University, Columbia Thesis, Harvard Law Review, passports, medical records, baptism, adoption records, and, of course, the centerpiece of all of it, the birth certificate. And we now know the law firm Perkins Coie. The Justice Department has reported that the president has spent, and his campaign has spent, millions of dollars employing these people to deny release of any available information to the public and interested parties. Courts have refused to try the facts of the case, and several cases are pending court review and appeal. But now comes Colonel Terry Lakin. 7 days from today at Fort Meade it will begin. General, your thoughts?
Well, I've taken on this case along with Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, who was former Vice Chief of the Air Force, and we've come to some conclusions here. Number one, we don't think there is a birth certificate out of Honolulu. We don't think he's a natural-born citizen under the Constitution. We think it's probably the biggest fraud that's been perpetuated on the American people is his election. And so from Terry Lakin's standpoint, he's not eligible as Commander-in-Chief to issue any orders. And so Terry's standing up for that. And again, we're not birthers or anything like that. We're looking at it now as he's not a natural-born citizen under the Constitution. But then the extension of that is the corruption of the court-martial system within Department of Defense that we know has been subjugated from the Justice Department and the White House through the Defense Department into establishing what we call a kangaroo court. And General McInerney was to be called to testify on the behalf of Commander-in-Chief in Orders, and Colonel Lind, who's the kangaroo court judge, Colonel, she prevented any discovery of any of the documents you're talking about. And her rationale was it would be an embarrassment to the President of the United States. Now, if that's not injustice in a kangaroo court, I don't know what is, Peter. I mean, this is just absolutely disgusting to see what's happening to Colonel Lakin, and we all need to stand up and challenge the U.S. Government on this. Because Terry is a decorated officer, willing to serve his country, but not if there's illegitimacy within the government and chain of command.
I've tried to read this as closely as I can and understand it as closely as I can. There was a September hearing, and the JAG is Colonel Denise Lynn.
Correct.
And they used these terms. She censored the last remaining arguments that Lakin and his defense attorney, who we spoke to yesterday, Lakin had intended to explain his motives for disobeying the orders, and they was not granted discovery. He also Lind also rejected his request to call witnesses.
Correct, which was General McInerney, by the way, and myself.
And there was Alan Keyes. That's right, McInerney, right. Keyes, a bunch of different guys.
Yeah, and myself.
So he gets stripped of possible defenses. Now, yesterday we spoke with his attorney, who believes that Lakin's going to go to jail. He's going to go to Leavenworth.
And by the way, we're trying to light a fire under that defense team now. Now's the time to go on the offensive and challenge not only the corruptness but also the natural born. So I'm partly responsible for bringing in his defense team.
Does he become a political prisoner?
Absolutely, he does. Absolutely, he does. And that's why American people have to look at this as an example of a brave officer standing up to the legitimacy of our commander-in-chief. And the corruptness of the system all the way, again, from the White House down through the Department of Defense to the convening authority. Now, I think there's treasonous offenses going on here myself, and I'm not one of these conspiracy guys at all, but I know there is conspiring going on at the highest levels of our government. It's influencing the officers of the court-martial system.
You know, one of the questions I posed yesterday, and it just made people so angry, and they were all screaming and calling me names and stuff, but if you knew across the street from you, we were talking about FDR and Lend-Lease, across the street from you was a very fine man who his life was exemplary, and Lakin's life is. And all you would have to do to save him from going to jail, losing his medical license and his retirement, his career, trashing his family, everything with it, all you have to do is walk across the street, General, and show him a piece of paper, or show a piece of paper to the police officers who are taking him away.
That's right.
What decent man would not do that?
Well, that's exactly right. And decent and honest system would not say, here, in fact, is the validity of Barack Obama, who, by the way, was never vetted for his credentials,
but promised
other than being a community organizer.
Yeah, the transparency and the openness that was the promise
was absolutely closed and sealed.
I mean, but why wouldn't you not? And I heard all kinds of insane screaming calls and emails yesterday, but wouldn't you walk across that street and go to those police officers who had your friend and say, wait a minute, this is what you're looking for. Leave them go.
That's exactly right. Evidence, discovery.
Why would
it's been prevented in a court of law in the United States, and that's criminal.
Why would